the main thing, so like I change my sense here and there, but it just depends how I feel. I'm actually trying this Vaxi mouse out again. So I normally use from 1.7 to 1.9, right? That's like around probably my base sensitivity that I've used for the past, since I was 14. So like about 16 years I've used around this sensitivity. The highest I've gone was like 2.1 or 2.2. I did that because Shroud said try it when we were fucking around and I was just a streamer in like 2017. Instantly changed back after like, I gave it like a week and I was like, this shit's fucking terrible. It's just not me. 1.9 is like the highest I go. Around the lowest I've gone is like 1.5, but like recently I went down to like 1.68, 1.65. Too slow for me. So I'm back. I sit around like 1.7 to 1.9. If you're gonna change your shit, adjust like if you're using 1.7, go to like 1.8 if you want to go faster, or go to like 1.6 if you want to go slower. Like when people make a jump from like 1.7 to 2.5, I'm just like, what the fuck are you doing? The game is gonna feel completely different. Like if you're changing your sense because you see a player using it, you're like, oh, I could use it and I want to be like this player. I mean, that's good if you're first starting out, but eventually you're going to always come to your aim style. So like how your arm sits on your mouse pad, like if your arm on, if it's just your wrist like me, if your fucking full arm is up here, if you play with your arm, like swinging around, if you play like with just wrist movements, like you should adjust your sensitivity according to your your movement pretty much, right?
I feel like that's where
So for me, I play like wrist, but I use my arm to swivel, right? Nico plays like wrist, and then he uses his arm to swivel around and shit. And he's low. Simple is just a wrist aimer, right? It just depends. So if you're mainly wrist, you're more than likely going to use higher. If you're mainly arm, you're more than likely going to use lower. If you're in between, you're probably going to be a middle ground. That's kind of how the variation works, right? And then the fine tuning of it is just based on if you're overshooting on people, if you shake a little bit too much, if you're undershooting on people, you raise it a little bit. So it's stuff like that. You know what I mean? The main thing I would change, if you're going to change stuff, I guess like res is probably the one thing that people probably fuck around with in Crosshair. So if you're going to change res, like I completely understand. But you just have to remember, going from like stretch, it's going to feel different to like black bars, right? So again, like people think that when you change from like black bars to stretch, you should slow your sense down. If you're going to slow it down, I would go from like a 1.7, or if, let's say you're at 1.75, you're going from black bars to stretch, maybe 1.7. So you just lower it 0.05, so it's nothing crazy. But when people make these jumps from like 1.7 to like 1.5, I'm just like, bruh, your game is going to feel completely different, because even though these people are moving fast and it seems like everything is faster on stretched, it's not. It's all the same fucking speed. So for me, if you're just making that change, I would just adjust it in a 0.5 range if you're changing from a black bars to a stretched. 0.05, sorry. 0.05, not 0.05. 0.05's way too much. So that's how I would adjust it. I would fine tune if you're like in a bot server, go into bots and you're shooting bots, right? So there's two different ways you could kind of look at how your sensitivity is working, right? There's one way of just standing still, right? Which it isn't, you're not always standing still, but you're not always moving. So it's like, you're kind of like doing shit like this sometimes, like when you're as a CT, or you're just like posting, crab walking, or like walking, clearing angles, you know what I mean? So there's two ways to kind of look at it. One is just like slow movement. So like you can kind of be stationary, moving around, and then you just check, all right, slow movement wise, which is probably the most standard. Am I flicking perfectly? Am I undershooting or am I overshooting? And then the other way is just obviously running. So like running, trying to stay with like, you know, the heads. If you're undershooting or overshooting this way. You know? So those are two decent ways to gauge. And then obviously like DM and then being live in games too. But for me, I just look at, I make my sensitivity changes on, obviously if I use different mouse pads and different mice since I've been switching more recently, I will change my shit from 1.7, let's say 1.75 is my base, right? I'll probably change to 1.745 or 1.74, 1.755, or 1.76, stuff like that. Because if I'm feeling like, okay, I'm not clearing this angle fully, like, or I'm like running up cat, like for example, like Mirage, running up cat, I hard clear the conga and I turn around to kill cat. I need to make sure my mouse, if like when I swivel my mouse as hard as I can, I know where it's going to end up. So like the muscle memory of that type stuff. And then the little things are, so like let's say you're clearing an angle, but a guy's right here and you're running clearing and then you have to flick over. That's where you want the muscle memory to be different, like on point, right? So you want the little tiny sensitivity changes like that, the 1.6 to 1.65, or sorry, 1.765. Thank you. That's where you like make the tiny adjustments. Like, okay, I overshot this guy. You don't always do this like every single day. This is just like maybe you think about it like, okay, I'm struggling. Is it my positioning? Am I missing? Or is it peeking without nades? Like you have to, if you feel like you're missing, but it's minuscule, like you're doing an 88 and 4 or a 81 and 3 with an AK or M4, right? Then that's where you make the adjustments. Okay, like he headshot me instantly, but I body shot him. All right, I don't need to change. I just need to aim for the fucking head. That's the little things. And then like obviously clearing angles or retaking sights, you know, is CT. But the main thing is when you're flicking around, you want to make sure that even if you're off a little bit, sometimes that's just how the day is, right? Like you're a little bit slower that day. You didn't have caffeine, haven't drank as much water. All those little things play a factor, right? Or your focus isn't 100% there, which I think eating and drinking like water is directly correlated with how your mental is that day for sure. Like what you eat and what you drink is definitely correlated, and same with caffeine, all that stuff. But if you're noticing a big thing, like where you go to flick here and you're like over here, that's obviously a big fucking issue, right? Or if you flick here and you're way behind and this guy's this close, that's where you need to make an adjustment. But then even at longer ranges, you'll notice you flick, you're like over here. Okay, that's an even bigger issue, and then you have to adjust that. That's like a 1.75 to like 1.7, you know? So you have to make the adjustments based off of the range of how far people are. And like, are you stationary or are you moving? So those are like 3 things that you can gauge to how you should kind of adjust. Yeah, but simple does it with high sense. Yeah, I'm not talking about high, low, anything. I'm not talking about one specific thing. I'm talking about in general. If you just listen to the last things, the main points you look at is your wrist on the table? Is it just your wrist like me? Like your wrist on the table? Is your arm on the table? Do you play with your arm? Or do you play with your wrist? Or are you a mix between both? That's one. Next is, how do you aim when you're moving? And then how do you aim when you're stationary? Are you overshooting, undershooting in those ways? And then you look at the range of when you're overshooting and undershooting. That's how you look at like that's kind of how you gauge like how you should adjust your sensitivity, in my opinion. Tracking sucks dick. Well, again, that's like I have that issue with really low sense. So that's why I sometimes, like my pre-aim will be on point with low sense. But when someone's moving, or when I have to correction to like a bigger flick, like if I have low sense and my movement's here to here, it's fucking easy, right? But the harder part is when it's like here to here with low sense. Do you know what I'm saying? You also have to remember, if your sensitivity is faster, my dad made the best point. He doesn't even play the game. He said, you want your sensitivity as fast as possible with being able to control it. I agree with that because you're going to get to your target faster if you have higher sense, if you're flicking, right? So that's where I agree. What's up, brat? All right. But yeah, tracking is one of those things. Like if someone's, can you make these guys move? Like tracking is one of those things. How do you? Bro, just somebody run. Like when someone's moving, if you feel like you're behind, obviously your sense is a little slow, right? If you feel like you're in front or you're not really in control, like when someone starts moving, you flick too far. You're probably using a little bit too fast. How you doing, Brett? Do you think aim is that important? Yes, 100%. I think aim is at the highest ceiling it's ever been right now. I think that players in the teams that are in the top 10 can all demolish each other. I think that that's where stars like Nico, Axile, Kea Serrato, to me, Blame F, certain players just can always perform. That's where like the certain riflers are special, in my opinion, like Twists, Rops, stuff like that, you know? So I think that top 10, the skill ceiling for aim right now is at the highest it's ever been. I mean, Device even just said it too, but yeah, it definitely is. For me, if you're trying to fine tune a sense, Kovacs is actually a good way to do it. I use this thing since Kovacs, if you play on like a 4.3 or a 1920, you could play Kovacs for the CS thing, right? But if you play Stretch, you can't. So this is the other thing I used back in Source, Counter-Strike Source, to fine tune my sense. Does my wrist drag? Depends. Sometimes I drag my wrist more if I want to use a slower movement, and sometimes I swing hard, so I lift my wrist up a little bit, I think. So this is like the other thing I use. I'll show the map. I'll show the map in a sec. But, so I just do the mount 50. You could do 100, 25, whatever you want. But I change this mainly, right? 0.5. What's the other one? Delay 0.2. So you have different levels, obviously. So when the dots come up, you'll see. Hold on. So this is the thing that helped me in Source. And you just practice like flicks, right? I'm slow as fuck right now, but mind you. Practice flicks, see where sense is at. This is like a good base to see. And then you just hit the targets, you know what I'm saying? So like right now I'm kind of overshooting and not really doing it right, or not really hitting anything, to be honest with you. I also just switched my mouse, so a little fucked up, but I'm also talking, which will fuck me up too. Obviously, this one's not the best, but it's a good, like, base to find this. But, like, right now, I'm fucking slow, so. When I do 50, normally you want to probably shoot for above 40. Like, that was obviously awful, so. That's inconsistent? Why is that inconsistent? How you doing, Twice? No, you don't want to fine-tune a lot. Because, obviously, dude, you're going to wake up feeling different each day. I do Dar twice. I'm not finishing my kills though. To me, yeah. No, I'm not saying be like tens. What I'm saying is not inconsistent at all. If you're gonna think that you should change your sense every single day, you're fucking wrong. You're gonna feel different every single day. The amount of hours you get, like the amount of hours you sleep, what you eat, what you drink, everything is gonna feel different each day, 100%. It should feel the tiniest bit different though. But I'm just saying, for people that are like, oh fuck, I'm missing, I'm not getting my frags, this is like a decent way. The tips I just gave is a decent way to improve and just stay consistent to one sensitivity. He literally goes from
back to FPLC in smiles love across the pond. Anything I did badly?
I'll check later if you linked a video. But well, I think doing like, so people could say DMing is better. I mean, DMing is probably better in certain aspects and aim training is better in certain aspects, right? Why do you think people hit when you play baseball? Do you just hit straight batting practice all the time? No, people hit off the tee. People hit soft toss, like they sit like on one knee right next to you and hit you soft toss, and then they also do batting practice where they pitch it to you, right? So there's multiple ways where you're always working on it. And I think CS is kind of like that, where you have to work on those little things, all the little things, just like baseball, because it's CS is very detailed like that. Yeah, Zai was just insane, like game sense, 100%. But you also have to remember, I think riflers have to DM. I think there's people like Naf that can just body shot for sure. But his positioning and him as a baiter, it's easier, so you can kind of get away with that. But people that, like a fucking Nico that's more aggro, your aim always has to be on point. And if it's not, you're gonna play like shit. Play like shit. Well, crosshair placement is huge, of course. Crosshair placement just makes everything easier. It just makes it so when you adjust, it's much easier. But yeah, those are just some tips that I would recommend. And I'll get this map for you guys really quick. This map's just called training _ aim _ csgo 2. Watching second map, yeah. CS turning into a high sense game? Nah, it's all preference, man. It's not high sense or low